Hi class. For this presentation I did Mexican food and beverages versus American. I will be including food, of course, coffee, and beer. Mexican food. Mexican and American food are completely different in some aspects and then the same in some others. Americans mostly are barbecue, barbecue chicken, barbecue ribs, pulled pork, our crafty macaroni and cheese, our cornbread. On the other hand, Mexican food primarily uses tortillas, corn, and flour. Most of their dishes come with separate parts. They will have their meat, their rice, and refried beans. Two things that we are similar in would be our salads. Both dishes, primarily, we have some type of salad, as in their taco salad would have a tortilla shell. Ours would probably have croutons instead. To get about coffee. Mexican coffee has a history of coffee production, grown in the south central to southern areas of the country. Mexico is one of the largest producers of organic coffee. Some of its history of growing coffee dates back to the 1980s, when coffee was the most valuable export. The best Mexican coffee is known as Altura, which means high grown. Mexican coffee is considered very high quality, among the finest in America, and is one of their biggest exports. American coffee, we mainly got the idea from the Italians, hence our espressos. World War II. Unlike Mexico, we don't have many coffee plantations. A Frenchman took a plant and grew it, placed it in America and grew the plant. It thrived in our climate. America is not large in the export of coffee, and our history of the farmers were actually slaves instead of migrant workers, like in Mexico. Americans' coffee is mostly imported and is not naturally grown in our country. We also make coffee differently than they do. They dry their coffee beans carefully in the sun. They also have what we would call factories. They prefer to call them small cooperatives. Where they wash and dry their coffee beans in a large container, as you can see here, of water. They also use a pilon to condense or grind their coffee beans, which is a small wooden container with a stick that you are able to crush. As in American coffee, we do not have small cooperatives. If we do, we are more industrialized and have known brands as Folgers and stuff like that that already come either pre-grounded, or when we make a cup of coffee, when preparing our coffee, we don't wash our beans carefully and slow dry them in the sun. We roast them or bake them on a baking sheet. Most Americans use a bean blender instead of a pilon to make their coffee grinds. Beer. Mexican beer. In the 1980s, there were several productions of Mexican beer. Our prohibition allowed them to produce, I believe, about 36 manufacturers, and a lot of the states would cross over into the borders to enjoy Mexican beer. Their most popular beers, which we all have probably had at one point in time, is Corona. Mexican beer has some microbreweries. These are normally produce ales instead of lagers. The U.S. has a long history of producing alcohol, but let's focus on just beer. We have manufactured more than 3,000 breweries, which consist of mini microbreweries, unlike Mexicans, where it's rare to have a microbrewery. One of the known most popular beers is Budweiser. Most of our beers are lagers, and with our mini microbreweries, we seem to have a variety of many different types of beers. So, to compare, even though we are so close, we're not too far, we do have different styles of food, and we enjoy both cultures of food. Their coffee is more of a delicacy and grown, whereas the U.S. mostly imports their coffee when Mexico exports their coffee. We both have different styles of beers, mini microbreweries, not so mini microbreweries, but we both are large exporters of beer.